So what happened to the one that got away? This is the central question of the film Touch, Iceland's official entry for Best International Feature Film Oscar. It might just be the cynic in me, but I despise the Richard Curtis-style romance, which Touch has in bucket loads. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the film, as well as undertaking some analysis of how well will it do in the Oscar race. If you're new to my channel, my name is Paul, and I review the best of world cinema, and I follow the race for Best International Feature Film Oscar, from countries selecting their films to the final winner. So let's roll and review the film. Touch sees Iceland on the cusp of a lockdown in 2020, and Christopher has received a diagnosis of dementia, with the instruction to go and resolve things in his life, as he doesn't have much time left. He is desperate to live the best possible life that he has remaining, and to tie up the loose ends. This includes trying to find the love of his life in both London and Japan, who he has not seen for over 50 years. Dispersed throughout the film is his memories of 1960s London, where he drops out of university and gets a job in a Japanese restaurant. Here he meets Miko, and they have a love affair together. However, the Japanese family have to return to Japan at the drop of a hat, and he is clueless why. 50 years later, it is his mission to go and find her.
Fólk í þínum sporum, það notar tækifærið til þess að gera hreint fyrir sínum dyrum.
The narrative is long and drawn out, and not in a good way. Set in the 2020s at the start of the pandemic, it intervenes back into 1960s, and it goes back and forth between the two time periods in order to create an emotional effect. While on a technical level, it manages to go back and forth between the two time periods effectively and seamlessly. However, it doesn't quite work because there's an over-reliance on the 1960s, which I have issues with. It doesn't quite have the emotional effect it's looking for by doing this. The real interesting bit is the 2020s, when he's looking for his love, and there's not enough attention being paid to this time period. I feel it would have been better if they only went back to the 1960s on occasions, to have small snippets of memory, rather than have two different films side by side. The 60s strand just feels very cheesy, and much like a Richard Curtis film, it is slightly cringe. There is a really cringy moment where they establish, because he's got long hair and she's Japanese, they are Yoko Ono and John Lennon. The over-reliance on the 1960s means the ending where they are in Hiroshima is quite rushed, and it doesn't give such an important subject time to breathe. Instead, it feels like they are hurriedly explaining what's happening in order to get to the end of the film. Overall, the acting is okay. It doesn't help the Richard Curtis tone to the film, which prevents me emotionally engaging with some of the performances. Egil Olafsson is perhaps the best performance in the film. He plays the older Christopher. I really appreciated when he was on the screen because he was so good, and really missed him when we went back in time. More time in Japan and exploring his personal arrangements would have made the film much more stronger. The real highlight of the film, though, was the cinematography. Bergstein Bjorgårdsson is a remarkable cinematographer and has done great films such as The Deep and Women at War. He beautifully used the light to be able to demark the different time periods seamlessly, and it looks a bit like a Sofia Coppola film, which I really enjoy the aesthetics to. I thought the use of place and location was done extremely well. It effectively used the whiteness and sparseness of Iceland, as well as the busyness of Japan. Again, the bit that lets it down is when they go to London in the 1960s. This is when they max up the Richard Curtis element of the film. It felt a bit magical and unrealistic and took me out of the film. There was no sense of authenticity about London. Instead, it just looked like another Richard Curtis film, except this time about people who don't have so much money. The film is accessible and easy to follow, to the point it hits you over the head with the message it's trying to say. There was absolutely no surprises in the plot, and it became rather predictable as the film went on. I appreciate some filmgoers love this sort of film. However, for me, it really grates and annoys me. I was particularly frustrated by the lack of ambition it has in exploring a number of different themes. It could have explored loneliness, isolation, and the pandemic. It should have gone into more depth with the treatment of people from Hiroshima. It could have gone into more detail about why would a student choose to drop out of a good university in order to work in a restaurant, because it felt it was just based upon his ideals, which felt performative. Too much of the film is dedicated to a youthful romance, which never feels authentic, believable, or emotionally engaging. I would give Touch 2.5 stars. It is really not to my taste, and I appreciate there'll be fans who love it, as the 92% on Rotten Tomatoes suggests. Touch is Iceland's official Oscar submission for Best International Feature Film. It was chosen over Can Debut When the Light Breaks. So now let's have a look at how well will Touch do in the Oscar race. From a personal perspective, Touch is the 4th submission I have seen, and I would rank it currently in 4th place. My personal views aside, I actually think Touch has an opportunity to make the shortlist, but go no further. This is because it's had a very positive response with a lot of critics and viewers, obtaining 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. It also manages to be very accessible, while containing elements of beautiful cinematography. However, I think there'll be stronger titles that will make it to the final 5. So let's quickly look at Iceland's history at the Oscars. This is the 45th film Iceland have submitted for the Oscars. They have only received 1 nomination, for Children of Nature. They have also had 3 films that have got to the shortlisting phase. In 2012, The Deep, which was also directed by Baltasar Kormákur, who directed Touch. In 2021, Lamb was shortlisted, as well as last year we had Godland on the shortlist. This makes Iceland the 36th most successful country at the Oscars, and is in equal place with Finland. In the last 10 years, they've had 2 films shortlisted, having submitted films every year. This makes them the 24th most successful country in the last 10 years at the Oscars. The 2 films that have been shortlisted in those 10 years, Lamb and Godlands, have happened in the last 3 Oscars. This suggests that Iceland are on a projection and doing well at the Oscars, and Touch has a reasonable chance of getting on that shortlist. It is quite a conventional film that's accessible, and is also backed by a big studio. However, if it was up to me, it would get no way near the shortlist. If you like my reviews and want to follow more for the Best International Feature Film Oscar race, please do subscribe to my channel.